Hey guys, okay, with this video, I'm gonna try something new out. So I got this magic pen right here, right? It doesn't look like much, but it actually allows me to be able to write in the presentation. So guys, what we're gonna do in this presentation, in this video, is talk about whether or not electoral reform in Canada is something that should happen. Now, just so we're aware, when we think about electoral systems, we're talking about how nations determine who will be in their government, right? And when I say nations, right, it could also apply to provinces or states. And for the most part, guys, there's two main electoral systems in the world. Number one is called first past the post, right? FPTP. And the second is known as proportional representation. Just for the record, we here in Canada, and we use something called first past the post. So when there's an election in Canada, I want you to think of a Canadian election as actually more like 338 mini elections. Okay, so 338 mini elections, and just so you're aware, whichever party gets the most seats in the House of Commons becomes the government. Whichever party has the second most number of seats becomes the official opposition, right? And it's the job of government to make laws and do the things that we, the people, expect of them, which, you know, what the will of the people is. And then it is the job of the official opposition to scrutinize, to hold government accountable, to give them, you know, the necessary accountability with their policies and things they're looking to pass. Now, that's first past the post. Why do we call it first past the post? It's called that because in every electoral district or constituency or riding, and here in Canada there's 338 of them, whichever person wins by getting one more vote than any other party gets 100% of the power in that district. Okay, so here in Canada, we have, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 maybe main political parties, and I would consider those to be the Liberals, the Conservatives, no offense, Bloc Québécois, but you're a regional political party and you only run in Quebec, so sorry, you're never going to win. New Democrats, sure, Greens, and then also the People's Party. And the People's Party, despite the fact that they didn't get much as far as the popular vote last time, I still consider them to be a like a legitimate political party here in Canada, despite their politics. Now, with that being said, 338 elections, and in each riding, right, again, whichever person, whichever candidate from the plethora of parties gets chosen to by the people, right? They get the most votes, and it doesn't have to be like an absolute majority. It can be what's called a simple majority. So let's say there's 4 different candidates in a riding. As long as you get 26% of the vote, and then another candidate gets 25, another gets 25, and the other gets 24, then you have the most votes in that particular riding and you will win, despite the fact that, 74% of people didn't vote for you in that scenario. Okay, now let's talk proportional representation. And what we're going to do, guys, in this is see the difference in the Canadian election outcome if we use proportional representation. Just so we're aware, most nations use a variant of proportional rep, yet Canada, the United States, and Great Britain are really the only strong liberal democracies which use first past the post still. So the question is, should we change it? Just so you're aware, in the 2015, sorry, I don't know, one of the two, 15 or 19, Prime Minister Trudeau promised it was probably the 15 election. In the 2015 election, I'll find it out for you and I'll post a video. But in the 2015 election, I'm going to say, Prime Minister Trudeau promised that this would be the last election that Canada used where we utilized the first past the post electoral system. And then he won. And then he didn't change it. So, let's try to figure out why that's going on. Okay, anyways, proportional rep, pretty simple, okay? The percentage of the popular vote, what's called the popular vote, means the percentage of seats in that government. So let's say you're the Liberal Party of Canada, 32% of people vote for you, then you'll get 32% of the seats in the House of Commons. If you are the Bloc Québécois, if you get 8% of the popular vote, so if all votes cast, you get 8% of them, you get 8% of the seats in the House of Commons, okay? So proportional rep, pretty simple. Percentage of popular vote equals percentage of seats. First past the post, I'll show you how it doesn't really make sense. All right, now let's talk about seats, which we have the seat total right here, versus percentage of popular vote. Now, just so we're aware, I'm going to use my magic pen right now. Just so we're aware, if we total up all of these right here, right, if we add 157 plus 121 plus 32 plus 24 plus 3 plus 1, the total is, I'm going to try to make this look good, the total is 338. Okay, you can do the math on that. Trust me, that's what it is. Okay, so there's 338 seats in the House of Commons. Let me just erase that so we get out of this here. Boop. There we go. And then I'm just going to close that. Now, let's talk about percentage of the popular vote. There's a difference between how many seats you get versus the percentage of the popular vote in the first past the post system. So in the 2019 Canadian federal election, 33.1% of Canadians, so of every vote cast, right, of every vote in this 2019 election, 33.1% voted for the Liberals. And then 34.4% voted for the Conservative Party of Canada. The Bloc Québécois got 7.7, NDP 15.9, Green 6.5, I'm just going to scroll down a bit, Independent 0.4, People's Party 1.6, and other got 0.0% of the popular vote. I mean, there's other parties. There's like a Marxist-Leninist Party of Canada, right? There's a Communist Party of Canada, but they didn't get enough vote to actually register at all, right? Like it was just basically a non-factor. Now, when we look at the numbers right away, we should see some weird stuff going on. When we compare the Liberals and Conservatives, the Liberals got more seats in the House of Commons than did the Conservative. However, when we look at the percentage of the popular vote, notice the Liberals actually got less than the Conservatives. How can this be? Next, let's continue to look at some strange outcomes. Look at the Bloc Québécois. They got 7.7% of the popular vote. So for every vote cast in Canada in the 2019 election, the BQ got 7.7%, the NDP got 15.9%. However, when you look at the seat allocation above, you can see despite the fact that the NDP got about twice as much of the popular vote than the Bloc Québécois, the Bloc Québécois actually got more seats in Parliament. Now, I ask you this very simple question. Does this accurately reflect the will of the people? And I would argue, no, it doesn't. Okay, let's look at some more anomalies. Let's look at the Green Party, right? The Green Party got 6.5% of the popular vote. The Bloc Québécois got 7.7%, so not a lot of difference between the BQ and the Green. But look at the difference in seat allocation. What, like a 1.2% difference in popular vote? The Greens only got 3 seats, whereas the Bloc Québécois got 10 times as many, right? They got 32, right? 32 instead of 3. So you would think that the Bloc Québécois would have got 10 times the amount of the popular vote, but that is just not true. All right, now with that being said, what I want to do with you here, guys, is talk about the reality of Canadian elections. So we know that in a Canadian election, let me just bring this up again, we're aiming for 330, or we want to get as many as possible of the 338 seats. Now, guys, in Canada, you can either get what's called a majority or a minority government. To get a majority government, you get 50% plus 1 seat. Okay, that's what we're aiming for. I apologize, that writing looks horrible. Okay, so there's 338 seats in the House of Commons that, you know, you can notice on the page right here, there's like, it shows the electoral map that breaks it all down, right? Just trust me when I say there's 338 districts. So you want to get 50% plus 1. So 50% of 338 is 169. And then plus 1 equals 170. So every party in a Canadian election is looking to get 170 seats, right? That's what we're aiming for. Now, based upon that, we can do some quick math here and see that the Liberal Party of Canada did not achieve a majority government this time, right? They got a minority because they got under 170 seats. Okay, now let's move down. We got some math we need to do here, okay? And this math is going to help us with when we complete the table down below. Look, I'm going to scroll down here. Boom, I know, crazy, some math. I know what you're saying right now. You're like, Mr. Crosby, you're not a math teacher. You're not qualified to talk about numbers and things like that. But look, I'll be honest. This is about the extent of my mathematical ability, right? This simple arithmetic and converting numbers from decimals to percentages, this is about it. So this is probably what, getting up to grade 6 math, so I can handle this, so don't freak out. Now, to get the numbers and populate this, what we're going to do is do some quick calculations. So number 1 here says the party that received the most seats in the election was the Liberal Party. What number of seats in the House of Commons is necessary for a majority government? And the answer for that, once again, sorry, let me just click this here. The answer for that is what? It's 170. Now, it says, accordingly, did the Liberals have a majority or a minority government in 2019? Well, again, the Liberals got 157 seats. So to answer that, they got a minority government. Why? Because 170 is greater than 157, right? So if they don't get 170, they don't get a majority government. Now, I guess we should answer or address the issue. Why do governments want to get a majority government? And the answer to that would be the fact that when you get a majority government, it gives a government stability, right? When you have a majority government, because of that principle that we talked about before called party discipline, because of that, what happens is you risk toppling the risk of toppling a majority government is almost non-existent, right? Because based on party discipline, when there's a major vote in the House of Commons, you're always going to have your party members vote the way you tell them as the leader of your party. So as long as you have that majority, every bill is going to pass. Now, number 1B and then bullet or sub-bullet number 1 says, what number of seats would need to change if it was to be in this case, it'd be a majority. So they had 157. They need to get to 170. They would have to go up by how many seats? They would have to go up by 13 seats, right? They'd have to go up by 13 seats. Okay, now with that being said, let me just erase that. Boom. The next particular question, number 2 here, says in the last election, the Liberal Party received 157 seats in the House of Commons. What percentage of the total number of seats is this? Okay, how do we do this? I know, Mr. Crosby, this is math. I'm confused. What do we do? All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go 157 over 338. And when you do that math, it equals, and I'm going to convert it to a decimal rounded to the nearest tenth, it equals 46.4%. Okay, now, so the Liberals got 46.4% of the seats in government. However, let me just erase this and go back. They got 46% of the seats in government, yet, let's just go up here. They actually only received 33.1% of the popular vote. So why did the Liberal Party get about 13% more than they should? Good question. Now, number 3. Let's do the math on the Conservative Party. All right, so number 3, in the last election, Conservatives received 121 seats in the House of Commons. What percentage of the total number of seats is this? And again, coming back to our drawing tool, boop, 121 over 338. And again, I'm going to convert it to a percentage, rounded to the nearest tenth of a percentage, and it equals 35.8%. Now, that's definitely closer, right? 35.8%. Now, let me just clear this because we need these numbers, right? And then I'll close the drawing tool again. And if we go back up, here, right, the Conservatives received 35.8% of the seats in the House of Commons, and they got they got exactly 34.4% of the seats in government. Okay, of the popular vote. So 35.8% of the seats, 34.4% of the popular vote. Now, let me just tell you how it breaks down for the Bloc Québécois. Bloc Québécois, right? They received 32 seats in the Canadian House of Commons, and 32 seats out of 338 equals 9.5% of the seats in the House of Commons. The NDP, they got 24 seats. 24 seats out of 338 equals 7.1%. So 15.9% of the popular vote, but only 7.1% of the actual seats in the House of Commons. Next one, Green Party, they received 3 seats in the House of Commons, and they actually only got 0.9% of the seats in the House of Commons. So not even 1%, despite the fact that of all Canadians who voted, 6.5% didn't vote for them. And then lastly, we have Independents. They received 1 seat in the House of Commons. 1 seat is 0.3%. And they got 0.4% of the popular vote. And then look at the People's Party. They got 1.6% of the popular vote, but they got 0 seats. Now, that might sound insignificant. Only 1.6% of Canadians voted for them. However, 1.6% of 338 is probably somewhere around 4 seats, right? So instead of 4 seats, they received 0, none, nada, zilch, zip. So that's problematic. Now, knowing these numbers, what we can do is start to populate this table. So it says total number of seats won in first past the post system. So I'm going to start typing into this document. So total number of seats that we got for the Liberal Party was 157. Okay. Conservatives got 121. The Bloc Québécois, they received 32. The NDP received 24. The Greens received 3. And the Independents received 1. Now it says percentage of total seats in the House of Commons. Percentage of total seats is 46.4, right? We did that math already. 35.8. And then 9.5 for the Bloc Québécois. 7.1 for the NDP, the Greens got 0.9, and then the Independents got 0.3. And I should put my unit percent. And if we add these numbers up, and this is weird how math works, it should come pretty darn close to 100. Now, percentage of popular vote. Let's go back up. So percentage of popular vote for the Liberals was 33.1. Okay, going back up for the Conservatives, 34.4. Now again, right off the bat, we see some strange things going on here. 33.1% of Canadians voted for the Liberals, yet they received 46.4% of the popular vote. Now let's keep looking at these strange election results. Bloc Québécois received 7.7%. Yet they got 9.5. Okay, what about the NDP? NDP, 15.9. But they only received 7.1. If I was the NDP in this election, I would not be very happy because they received about half the number of seats that they should have. Now going back up, Green Party was 6.5%. Sorry, let me go back to the table here. So 6.5%. And then Independent received 0.4 of the popular vote. So again, if I was the Green Party, much like if I was the NDP, right, I would not be very happy because look how underrepresented they are. They received, if the NDP, 7.1% of the seats in the House of Commons, but received 15.9% of the actual vote total in the election. The Green Party received 0.9% of the seats, but actually got 6.5% of the popular vote. Now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at what happens if Canada used proportional representation. Now, how do we do this? What we're going to do is we're going to take the percentage of the popular vote and we're going to simply multiply it by converting it to a decimal by 338. So 33.1% will become, let's do the math for you really quickly here, right? 33.1%, I'll just draw it over here. So 33.1 will become 0.331, and we're going to multiply that by 338, okay? And I'm going to do the math really quickly on this, and I'm going to populate the table for you. Be right back. Actually, let me erase this first. I'm going to erase. I'm going to turn that off. Okay, let me do the math. I'll be right back. All right, you will notice that if Canada used proportional representation, the outcome of the election would be much different. Rather than the Liberals receiving 157 seats, they would have actually have received 112. And notice the Conservatives would have actually have won the election, right? The Conservatives lost to the Liberals using first past the post, but if we use the idea of proportional representation, they would have actually have won. And it makes sense because look, right? The Conservatives received 34.4% of the popular vote, and the Liberals received 33.1%. So of all people who voted in this election, most people voted for the Conservatives, or the highest percentage of people voted for the Conservatives. As a result, they should have won the election. So continuing with this, guys, the Bloc Québécois was actually overrepresented. In our first past the post system, they got 32 seats. They should have actually got 26% if we use proportional rep. Next one, NDP in our system, first past the post, they got 24. They would have had 54, right? they would have had twice as many as the Bloc Québécois. And why? Well, because the percentage of the popular vote was about twice as much. So mathematically, that makes sense. The Green Party only received 3 seats in the House of Commons in our first past the post system. Yet, if we use proportional rep, they would have received 22 seats in the House of Commons. There'd be a much larger Green Party representation in the House of Commons had we used proportional rep. And then lastly, the independents, it would have changed, right? From 0.3 to 0.4, and then 1 seat to 1 seat. Big deal. So, guys, if I were the Conservatives, the Bloc Québécois, the Conservatives, the NDP, and the Green Party, I would want to change the system from first past the post to proportional rep. If I was the Liberal Party of Canada, who is overrepresented by, what's 157 minus 112, 22, 32, 42, 52, 45 seats, right? The Liberals were overrepresented by 45 seats. How do you defend this in a democracy? Democracy is supposed to represent the will of the people. Most Canadians said that the Conservatives should win when you look at the total number of votes cast, yet the Liberals won. How do you defend this? That's the question I want you to think about. It's hard to defend, right? I like to think of first past the post as producing mathematically nonsensical election results. The election results are nonsense. How can the winner, as far as the total number of people who voted for him, actually not win the election? Doesn't make sense, right? So, and you know what, guys? Here's the crazy thing. In the United States of America, now 3 times in American history, right? 3 times. Maybe it's 4 times. I'll have to check that out. But guys, in the US, like in the last presidential election, when you looked at the percentage of votes cast versus who won, Hillary Clinton got about 3 million more votes than did Donald Trump across the United States. But because of what they use down south, something called the Electoral College, all right, Trump actually became the president, right? That's crazy. So, guys, look, I just want you to think about this. Is it time for electoral reform here in Canada? Maybe yes, maybe no. What we're going to do is I'm going to put a chart in the next module about the pros and cons of first past the post versus proportional representation. And I'll let you decide whether you think we should change. Now, I'm also going to put a few videos by a guy by the name of CGP Grey, who talks about the first past the post system and how terrible it is. And then he's going to show you how the American Electoral College works, which is it's just a variant of first past the post. And then he's going to show you how you can win the presidency of the United States with only less than 22% of the popular vote, right? And again, how can this be in a democracy that we see losers actually win? Because that's what happened here in 2019 in Canada. The loser of the election, right? The Liberals received less of the popular vote than did the Conservatives, yet they won. I don't know what to say about this. That's crazy. Anyways, we'll continue with this and we'll look at this in more detail here in a little bit, okay? Make sure you watch the CPG Grey videos. They're very well done.